All right, the science of weight loss, part 3. Maintaining weight loss is a completely different game. We talked about what your body is made of and what occurs during weight loss, but talking about maintaining weight after you lose it is very different. How we initially lose fat is not how we will keep it off. That's why it's different. That's why it's a different game. And this is due to metabolic adaptations that occur. In the beginning of a calorie deficit, what you're experiencing is a drastic reduction in energy intake compared to energy expenditure, which leads to weight loss. Basic. Basic, you use more energy than you eat. Energy expenditure matches body mass. So when you're at a lower body weight, this decreases the energy your body needs to use in order to function. So if you're at a higher body weight, your body needs more energy to keep you alive. So your energy expenditure matches the body mass. Over time, your body will eventually establish a balance between energy intake and energy expenditure. This helps to generate a metabolic rate that allows you to maintain your new lower body weight. Changes in metabolic processes, as well as compensatory behavioral mechanisms to conserve energy. Essentially, hormone levels will modify to these changes and influence changes in things like heart rate, blood pressure, sympathetic nervous system, etc., to account for your new lower energy needs. So, all of these things, hormones will modify their levels in order to signal other changes in the body to account for the new lower energy needs. So, what happens is what was once a deficit will eventually become your maintenance calories. This is situations where we hit things like weight plateaus. Because at one point, 1,800 calories was below your energy needs and allowed you to lose weight. But now you lost weight at your lower body weight, 1,800 calories maintains your energy. So you're at a plateau, you're not losing anymore. The importance of this is that what you do in the beginning will eventually have to be modified in order to continue to see fat loss and also stay at maintenance weight range. So oftentimes, people get this idea that they go on a diet and they can't sustain it for a long period of time. But that's not the point of a diet. The point of a diet is to get you to a certain point, and then you have to modify to stay at that point. And this is where instances like interval fat loss ideologies come into practice, which is more advanced than what we're discussing in this program. But this is the idea that you give diet breaks because we're all you. It's normal to hit weight plateaus. You just got to adjust for them. So if you give the body a break and you take a break from fat loss, you increase your calorie ranges, you stay at maintenance for a little bit, and then you return back to that fat loss, then you're able to lose fat again. If you try to just stick with what you're doing when you hit that plateau and just either restrict calories more, things along those lines, likely it backfires and that never really works out. And this is all because of all of these, your body accounts for the differences in energy needs. And we have to take that into consideration. So, what really happens, the biggest struggles of maintaining weight after weight loss is primarily due to a lack of compliance to exercise or diet regimens, right? Like you kind of fall off the wagon. You once exercised 5 times a week and then you hit your goal and you kind of taper off, things along those lines. Or you get a little bit loosey goosey in what you're eating. You eat more sugars, calories, carbohydrates, things along those lines, you don't follow the principles, which again, if you're blindly kind of following a diet plan of like eat this or eat that, and you're not really understanding the framework, it becomes very easy to fall off the bandwagon, if you will. But the fat loss flow, the framework that we're going to be going over when we talk about the the nutrition and the eating, is presented and is designed in a way that this isn't a problem. But usually when we're thinking about weight regain, or you lose weight and then you gain it all back, it's because, again, this instances of you're not following the things that you were doing to get you to that weight. And then there's also gut hormone secretions, as we mentioned in the last modules. Those changes in the different hormone secretions that are happening within the gut also lead to a reduced secretion of different anoretic hormones and enhance arsogenic hormones. I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but essentially hormones that impact your appetite, right? Ones that make you not want to eat, so AKA appetite loss, and then ones that drive you to eat, so they increase your appetite. So the appetite reduction hormones are reduced, and the appetite it, or the increased appetite hormones are enhanced. I don't know why I'm getting so confused by this, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to tell you. And all of these are due to the body's reaction and adaptation to all these energy expenditure changes. So it's important to understand all those hormones and the specific nutrients that are needed to make them function. Otherwise, we're going to be vulnerable to what they're doing. We're going to be a slave to the game, if you will. So when I talk about those other hormones in the last module, that's what I'm talking about here, of these gut hormone secretions, of us wanting to eat nutrients specifically for the optimal functioning of these hormones to help combat what they're doing by natural design. And of course, you don't have to be super nitty gritty of like the individual nutrients. If you're eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of different variety of vegetables, and I'll get into the nutrition aspect of it, trust me, then you're going to be fine. But this is why we want to think about more veggies as the very first thing that we ever think about when we're building meals to support metabolic health and fat loss. But it's really necessary to make lifestyle changes and follow realistic plans. I always say this to my clients: what you do to lose the weight is something that you have to continue to do. Ask yourself the question, am I willing to do this? Oftentimes, clients come to me and they want to get to a specific weight goal. And so they give up something like alcohol, and they will not eat or will not have alcohol and take it out of their life, and, do that for a couple of months. And then maybe they get to their goal weight and they're happy, and their, life is great. They're happy. They're feeling healthy. They're feeling good. And all of a sudden they go on vacation, or they add it back in, and they have alcohol at a party, and then their weight goes off the charts. And they're like, oh my God, I regained all this weight. They spiral, and they're like, oh, I have to start over. I have to start over. It's like, if you were not willing to give up alcohol for the rest of your life, then we want to create a plan, and we want to create a situation, and we want to learn skills and build tools that allow you to include alcohol as part of the picture, so you're able to maintain that when you're coming off of the active fat loss phase. So always ask yourself the question, am I willing to do this forever? If you get up at 5 a.m. every single day and do a super high intense workout for 3 months and you lose all that weight, are you willing to do that for the rest of your life if that's going to be what's required to get you at that specific weight? Ask yourself that question. Very, very important. And that's why this is a struggle for a lot of people. And that's why when we talk about maintaining the weight, it's kind of a different ball game. When we're talking about fat loss obstacles, we're talking about metabolic flexibility. This is a pretty complex concept, but essentially what it is, the term metabolic flexibility, you've probably heard it before on social media and things along those lines. There's a glucose fatty acid cycle in the body, and it's a biochemical mechanism that controls fuel selection and adapts substrate supply and demand in normal tissue in coordination with hormones controlling substrate concentrations in circulation. That's a whole bunch of science. What it means is this is how your muscle and fat talk to each other. In any given situation, in any time, your body decides what nutrient it's going to use for energy. Because remember, carbs, glucose, and fats, fatty acids, are the body's energy source. So the body is always deciding in any given moment which nutrient it's going to use for energy. And it easily, in an ideal environment, the body is easily able to switch back and forth depending on this certain need, the nutrient availability, environmental cues, etc. Whatever fuel it needs to burn glucose, it needs to burn fat. It will do that when it needs to at any time, and it's very fluid, flexible system. But there's a competition. There's something that's important because there's a competition between glucose and fatty acids for their oxidation in muscle and adipose tissue. So when we have an ideal situation, when we're metabolically flexible and our body's able to switch back and forth very easily, it allows us to burn fat when we're asking the body to, when we're on a weight loss, when we put in weight loss efforts, we're on a calorie restriction, when our goal is to lose fat, our body's able to do that pretty easily because the utilization of one nutrient inhibits the other directly. So anytime your body is using glucose for energy, it's not using fatty acids. Anytime your body is using fat for energy, it's not using glucose. So only one can happen. So there's always a competition in muscle and in fat tissue. When glucagon, which is storage carbohydrate, storage glucose from carbs, is high, insulin is low. So the body says, all right, let's use fat stores as energy for functioning because we need to tell the liver to make and protect glucose for the other important tissues like brain that rely on glucose exclusively. What happens or what becomes an issue is in instances of metabolic inflexibility. So there's an impairment of this cycle that makes weight loss much harder. So think about metabolic dysfunction type picture. Essentially, it's characterized by decreased fat oxidation during fasting and a reduced ability to upregulate carbohydrate oxidation during feeding. What do I mean? Essentially, the body does not burn as much fat as it should when you're fasting, not eating, and then the utilization of glucose during a meal becomes dysfunctional. So think of a situation like somebody develops diabetes. This is what's going on. This is metabolic dysfunction in the body. And sedentary activity is one of the main, or is a hypothesis as being one of the main predictors of metabolic flexibility. So, are you super active? Are you sedentary? If your body's not moving, it's kind of a predictor of if you're able to be metabolically flexible or inflexible. Also, having a diet that's very high in fat and carbohydrates. I want to be clear on that. This is not saying that fats are bad, carbohydrates are bad. This is saying if you have a diet that is combined with eating a lot of fats and also eating a lot of processed carbohydrates, this can lead to the situation of metabolic dysfunction. Insulin orchestrates systemic flux and disposal of glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids. Resistance to the actions of the hormone gives rise to a metabolic storm, also known as stiffness in mitochondrial substrate selection. So, what is happening is various organs and cells fail to appropriately adjust fuel sources in response to nutritional circumstances. The body is not able to accurately or easily select the substrate fuel it wants to use. And this causes um, various organs and different cells to be like basically confused and like they don't really follow suit and they kind of go haywire because they're not getting the signals. There's a stiffness in the mitochondrial ability to, again, easily and accurately go back and forth depending on the body's needs. So it's kind of this state of nobody knows what's going on and nobody's listening to anybody, and there's like absolute chaos. Intermittent fasting is something that affects circadian rhythms, sleep patterns, lifestyle behaviors, intestinal microflora. And there's a lot of studies that show intermittent fasting can really improve metabolic health by stimulating specific biochemical, almost like reprogramming that's directed to utilize stored energy during those fasting periods. But I always emphasize that intermittent fasting is not like a one off solution. Before you think about intermittent fasting, you have to really assess where your baseline blood sugar levels are doing and what your patterns are overall. Because in certain situations, this can be such an effective, useful tool. Not all the time, not for everybody. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. But it can be something that helps us re regulate almost the dysfunctional system and kind of get it back to working normally, to working that picture of like metabolic flexibility. So, the importance again, our goal is to become metabolically flexible for easier fat loss process. This is why I designed the plan, this program, why as I did, because we want to make sure we're eating. We want to make sure we're approaching. We want to make sure we're establishing all things that support being metabolically healthy and flexible so that when we're asking the body to lose fat, it's easy. Factors that really go into weight management are extrinsic, which are lifestyle, your behaviors, your choices, psychosocial, things along those lines, and intrinsic, which are energy balance, functional resistance to weight loss, all those things that we, have been talking about, all those changes with hormones and energy utilization, fuel selection, things along those lines. Um, High fat concentrations lead to loss of fat weight without stress to the fat tissue or reduction of fat-free mass. What do I That is a very awkward sentence, I'm sorry. What do I mean by that? Is that if you have a lot or if you have a higher body weight and you have more fat to lose, it's easier because your body, your fat tissue, your fat cells don't become as stressed and your muscle doesn't break down as easily. So as you get lower in body fat, it becomes much harder to lose that fat because there's an increase in cell stress that impacts this process. So oftentimes people will come to me and say, okay, I lost, I started losing weight and then now it's harder. I still have 10 more pounds to lose, but I can't seem to budge. nothing's kind of working. This is where cell stress comes into play and where we want to really hone in on different types of testing, different types of functional nutrition protocols, different types of alternative health strategies that can really help lower or help you manage the cell stress. The cell stress is still going to be there. You can't change biology, but we do things to help that situation. But this is why you might be able to lose 20 pounds pretty easily, but then the next 10 are much harder because there's a lot of cell stress as the body gets lower in body fat. And also, too, primary weight gain and weight regain are very different things. So the first time you ever gain 10 pounds versus you is going to be different than the 10 pounds that you gain from after losing 20 and then gaining 20. And then gaining 10, if that makes any sense. I feel like that was a little confusing. But the first time you gained weight is kind of a different ball game than when you lose weight and then you regain weight. Because sustaining weight loss underlies diverse homeostatic metabolic adaptations that we've been talking about through modulation of energy expenditure. So it changes the way that your body uses energy and also the energy needs of the body, which helps to improve metabolic efficiency, but it leads to an increase in the signals for energy intake. AKA your body, once you lose that weight, your body is able to use energy better. We can fix the metabolic environment, but we have hormone signaling that increases us to drive to eat more food. This is why it's very, very important to set up an eating framework that allows us to eat for satiety and satisfaction, protein and fats in our meals, in specific amounts of micronutrients that impact all of these hormone signaling pathways. We need to eat in a framework that accounts for all of those things to make weight management easier and possible. So, this is how you adjust for kind of all of the issues and obstacles that we just were talking about. A high protein, low glycemic index diet with physical activity. That gives more pronounced effect in reducing your hunger, minimizing postprandial insulin secretion, and maintaining insulin sensitivity. Essentially, it balances your blood sugar, decreases your hunger and cravings, and then also puts less stress to your cells. Insulin sensitivity. Situations of metabolic inflexibility are all falls into the umbrella. The term that you probably heard before, insulin resistance. So if we eat high protein, low glycemic style diets and we pair that with physical activity, that is how we account for that. Reduction in fat mass is going to lead to an increase in leptin. This drop creates a deficiency signal in the brain that induces a high energy intake response. Your thyroid hormones are also going to reduce. The HPT axis is a central modulator for weight maintenance through regulatory metabolic hormones. It's very, very important to check your thyroid hormones and eat micronutrients that support optimal functioning of hormones such as leptin and your other hunger, fullness, appetite, fat burning, fat storage, fat detox hormones that we discussed in all the other modules. After losing fat, your fat cells experience cellular stress. So the cells become smaller in size, and what this does is this affects the structure function axis. In a sense, they don't work as efficiently, right? The main job of a fat cell is to store fat. When you are losing fat, they're not doing their job. So they're pretty stressed out, right? You're thinking that you want to lose that fat because you don't want it, but they're like, whoa, what else am I going to be doing here? So there's a lot of that stress happening in those fat cells. Once you lose the weight, your body again adjusts that new energy balance, metabolic adaptation, which then renews the fat storage mechanism. So the it essentially makes sure your fat tissues are going to be receiving enough fat, which is their job, what they were designed to do. The energy demand causes the body to want to take in high calories to fulfill that need. So this puts you at a vulnerable risk of regaining that weight because your fat cells are kind of renewed after this metabolic adaptation. And they're like, all right, well, let me do my job. Let me pack in fat. So you need to eat more calories. You need to give me fat because you don't have enough fat. I need to store fat. So that's kind of where that comes into play. And your initial weight loss, what's going to happen is you're going to lose a more significant amount of weight, but induces that cellular stress, which puts you at a higher vulnerability to regain that weight. So, how you adjust for it or how you manage it is the best way is to lose gradually in the very beginning. If you lose quickly and a lot right away, you are putting yourself through all of this whole metabolic situation that I'm talking about. You're way more vulnerable to these biological drives and processes that you have no control over. So if you lose weight more gradually in the beginning and take a little bit of a slower pace, this allows your body to adapt to all of those things that are happening that you can't stop, that are going to happen regardless, and you have a greater chance for long-term weight maintenance. So that's how we're going to set up the structure, and that's why I say we need to talk about these things before we even talk about food because that's not the main thing. The main thing is establishing a framework that fits into these scientific principles. So let me leave you with something to think about. You don't need to believe in magic. You are magic. You need to believe in yourself. I don't know where I got that quote. I don't know who said it, but obviously I'm obsessed with it. I love everything magic, and that's just the best quote ever. It's not impossible to maintain your weight, but what we need to do is follow a plan that, again, addresses ways of eating, provides tools and skills, and works through real life situations that take into consideration all of these factors that are happening within your body, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you care about it or not. Fat Loss Flow is that framework that does it. You're in the right program. Let's move on to week 2 where we can finally talk about food.